All righty. So we'll do the call to order and roll call if we could.
Great. My agenda. Frederick Bear.
Here.
Carly Borchardt.
Here.
Gary Cecil.
Here.
Bryce Chisholm.
I'm here.
Patrick Coleman. Not present. Carol Crane.
Here, present.
George Foster. Not present. Alex Goff.
I'm here.
Annika Khan. Not present. Theodore Meek. Not present. Mac Rossi.
Delighted to be here.
Great. All right, we have a quorum, and the Tuesday, February 8th, Ward 5 Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting is called to order.
Great. Thanks everybody for being here. So we'll move on to our next item, which is A2, public comment. And this is for public comment on any action item on or any general public comment, and is limited to no more than 3 minutes per commenter.
And I
do have a hand raised.
Yeah, and I'll just add that if anyone would like to make a public comment who's attending the meeting, they can raise their hand using the icon that says raise hand. And if you can't see it on your screen, you might press the button that says more, and you'll see that option there. Thanks, Carly.
Shall I just start listing people off as they're raising their hands, or do we have any that are structured public comments submitted for the record?
I don't have any that have been submitted beforehand, but I will.
Okay.
Are you able to see their names?
I am. Yep.
Okay. If you want to, or actually, I guess I can. Sorry, I'll do it. Art Rangel for public comment. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I've got a comment on the Glow Plaza conditional use permit application. I've reviewed that application, and as you all know, with the conditional use permit, there's findings of fact that have to be made relative to that application, and particularly how they comply with the master plan. The fundamental question, I've got a variety of questions about that application, but the primary one is that some of those findings of fact have to do with compatibility with existing and planned land uses. The problem that I have is that we don't know what those planned land uses are at this point. The public doesn't, and I presume the city doesn't know that as well. That's that, you know, and I can get more specifics about some of these findings of fact that are in the application if you'd like me to, but that is initially what I'd like to speak to. And then when the item comes up, I'd like to speak to the issue of the traffic study, because I find it's flawed as well. First of all, it was done in 2020, and we've had a lot of new apartments and whatnot going in. So I don't know how traffic counts are going to be viable 2 years later, but I can speak to that later. Do I have an opportunity to speak that at the time the applicant does his presentation?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Janice Sangster Fallon.
Hi, I don't know if I'm allowed to bring this up because I don't know all your policies and procedures yet. But one thing we were working on or discussing when we were Ward 1 was speeding on Simons. And we did get the motorcycle police out here through a request, and they were busy giving out tickets, and then also to address trash in the neighborhood.
Yeah, you can share. This is a public comment, so you have 3 minutes to share any concerns or comments that you have for the record.
So am I still talking?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, we put in a special request here. We live on the corner of Quail Run Road and Simons, to have the motorcycle cops come out, policemen, and try and slow down traffic. And they were pretty busy giving out tickets on the, I think they came here 3 or 4 times and gave tickets out. And that was something that we were starting to talk about with Jenny Breckes before the pandemic hit. And then also to talk about, is there any trash pickup of the like canyon areas or along Mccarran that could be done? And that's the end of my comment.
Great, thank you. I will make a note of that. All right, Eric LaRude, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me? Yes, great.
Yes, you're a bit soft, but we can hear you.
Okay, let's see. Can you hear me now better? Maybe. Anyway, I'll just start talking. I also wanted to comment about the Glow Plaza item at the time when the presenter is speaking, because I'm still kind of confused as to what plans are for surrounding blocks around the Glow Plaza. And it seems like it would be helpful to evaluate the Glow Plaza if we also knew what else was going on some of the other, what the plans were for some of the other blocks in the near vicinity, such as the big block surrounded by Arlington, 2nd, Ralston, and the Railroad Trench. Also the block surrounded by West, 3rd, Arlington, and 4th Street. These are all close to where the Glow Plaza will be, but I don't know that it's been disclosed yet as to what is going on at those blocks. I know were questions asked at the public workshop on January 10th. I don't know that answers were ever provided. And also wondering, are there still plans for the open roofed amphitheater somewhere and a big parking garage? So these are all things that are kind of related to the Glow Plaza, but are not clear whether they're still happening or not. So those are my questions. Those are my concerns. I'd like to revisit that when Mr. Gordon speaks.
Did I get requested to speak?
Oh, sorry, no. Was that
Okay,
Art?
yeah, I didn't think so. Okay. just
Sorry.
wanted-
My
That's all right.
apologies. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, I
you.
think that was our last public comment, Amy, unless you have any additional. So if anybody else has their hands raised, I will call on you. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to the next item, which is A3, approval of the agenda for possible action. So has everybody been able to review? Do we have any modifications or changes that we're not aware of?
Mac Rossi, for the record. If everybody is in agreement, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Mac. May I get a second?
I'd second that, Bryce Chisholm.
Thank you, Bryce. With a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes. Next item is approval of the minutes. I'm hoping everybody was able to review these. These are from November 9th, so they're not from our last meeting, but they are from November. Does anybody have any comments or discussions, concerns?
Carly.
Carly
this is
Borchers
Amy.
for the record.
This is Amy
Go right
Pennington
ahead.
for the record. I did have the request to just explain a little bit of the process of if someone wants to modify minutes. And so
Great.
I will just quickly just share that if there is a board member that would like to discuss modifying the minutes, they can share what the proposed changes are, and the board can either vote to change them in this meeting and basically approve the new minutes, or they can vote to have staff basically draft the minutes with those changes to be approved at the following meeting. Either way, after the minutes will be reviewed by staff with the transcript of the video to make sure they are in line and accurate. So if there's any other questions about the process, I'm happy to help with that.
Well, Carly Borchard, for the record, I did want to mention that they are very thorough in comparison to what we've had in the past. So just kudos there. But I was curious the process now that we are recording or have the ability to record these meetings, if minutes are actually necessary, but I assume they are based off of what you just said, that they'll be compared to the actual video.
My understanding is that we do need to have a video or ideally we'd have a video and print transcript. I don't know if minutes will slightly change in the future because Zoom does record a transcript of this call, but as of right now, we haven't made any changes.
Gotcha. All right. Well, with all of that information, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Carly, this is Gary Cecil, record. I did actually have a couple of suggestions I wanted to raise, if I may.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
I cannot. I can see your black screen. There we go.
Okay, I just had, first of all, I would just echo what Carly said. I was very impressed with the minutes. I think it's well not possible unless you do a verbatim recording of everything to get it. So I really appreciate that. There were a couple of items I just wanted to suggest that maybe fleshed out what I thought were summary statements in the minutes on two items. First of all, on the Reno City Center Skyway, the current minutes record that the NAB members were quote unquote highly supportive. I look back to my notes and my recollection is that I think that that was true of the city center project as a whole, that we loved welcoming that as a project to downtown to bring residents and other businesses. But I think that there were a number of questions and comments that were made about the actual Skyway design and the need for it that I would say were not highly supportive. They were questions that that we would normally have. So I'm suggesting that we replace the second paragraph under Reno City Center Skyway to read, and it's in blue there. The residential parking currently in the garage was discussed. NAB member Cecil questioned why the existing Old Harris parking structure and its existing skywalk to the area of the future business tenant could not be used instead. He also raised the question about the safety of the skywalk's open design, specifically that objects could fall 26 feet down on pedestrians or cars. He suggested that Mr. Gordon refer to the safer design of the Arlington Towers skywalk to their parking garage. NAB members showed interest in a tour of the garage and expressed the need to ensure that safety, security, and engineering concerns are addressed. So I just am concerned about safety with that in particular. So I just wanted to suggest that. The second one, just to add a sentence at the end of the paragraph ending and a pedestrian amenity credit for the new online development agreement, quote saying, NAB member Cecil asked Mr. Gordon for a Gantt type chart with a 4-quarter lookout on upcoming Jacobs related activities. Mr. Gordon agreed to provide this. So those are my suggestions that I respectfully present to the other NAB members. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Very thorough. Amy, what would be the process at this point? Would we all discuss this and agree to it before we propose a motion, or would this be something that should be submitted for review?
So you can discuss it as a board, and if the board generally agrees and wants to make a motion to accept these changes, you can do so. It will still be verified after, just to,
Gotcha.
or you can request to have the minutes brought back to you next meeting for approval with the changes, or you could reject the changes, accept some or not others. It's just up to the board for discussion, and you can make a motion with what you'd like to do.
Understood. Thank you very much. Is there any comments or discussion from the other NAB members?
Mac Rossi for the record. I personally think it should be, since it's just a little lengthy, have it changed and we can approve it at the next meeting.
Harley Borchard, I would agree. I think that having it verified would be wonderful, and maybe just, I know that I agree completely with Gary that there was quite a bit of discussion and quite a few really pertinent comments and suggestions from the NAB members in review of that city center project. So I think with the review of that particular item and some additions to the notes or the minutes would be beneficial.
Then in that case, I'd like to make a motion that we table this until the changes have been made for these minutes and brought back to the next meeting.
Thank
That's a
you.
motion.
Do I have a second?
Second
Kelly,
that.
you do have a few hands raised. I don't know if you can see those.
Great, gotcha.
You know,
Frederick?
Councilman member Jordan has got her hand up. Maybe she can give some clarity to it.
Great. Councilwoman?
Thank you very much. I was just going to suggest, yes, this needed to go back for review. I also know that there is a training that's coming up for all the new NAB members in March. I'm a little worried about verbatim sort of minutes becoming a norm. That's not what minutes really are intended to capture. And I worry about that. So that is something, Amy, this is probably for your reference for the training, that we ensure that minutes are kept and produced in a consistent manner across all boards, and that we aren't veering from that succinct sort of minute-taking process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great input.
Councilmember Jordan,
Frederick?
I just wanted to ask Councilman Jordan, would you feel that it'd be best to go back over the recording and put it verbatim with the way it was said and then brought back to us?
Well, I don't know. Maybe this is something that we can, Amy, we can ask legal and sort of process historically wise. My concern is that I could see this developing into a nightmarish note-taking process. And I'm trying to avoid it being an individual sort of opportunity to expand and expound on a position where others aren't, I guess is my point. So I just want to make sure that we're not getting sideways with consistency historically and legal wise, and don't start heading down a path that you could spend an hour of each NAB meeting with each member going back over a preference of a verbatim situation, which could be to one person's position, I guess, as I'm trying to make it as succinct as possible.
Makes sense.
I'm not asserting that anything was incorrect. I'm just saying that's not historically my understanding of it.
I sincerely appreciate where Councilwoman is coming from. In the past, just for on the record and just to throw it out there, we did have one particular minute taker that was really great at capturing just kind of the highlight points, you know, and kind of highlighting those under the topic where it wasn't, like she's mentioning, you know, a huge read and something that we have to then study and make sure that what we said was what we said. I really like that preference, just having some highlights or some of the comments that were made rather than just a generalized statement, blanket statement. But I love the idea of maybe touching on this a little bit further in our training, and obviously having some consistency throughout the wards. So it's not, you know, that we're special and have our own minutes, certainly. But I am still supportive of the motion that's on the table from Mac, that we table this just for a little bit more review and maybe just a little bit more clarity, just to make sure that we're all in agreement that we can do one more perusal. But I'm open to anybody being against that too. So please speak up.
Looks
Or
like
I'll take a second.
Actually, just to clarify, this is Amy Pennington for the record. Are you asking in the motion that staff make modifications to the minutes for you to review?
You're asking me, Mac Rossi?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm asking to go back and review the recording and get the verbatim exactly what was said. But I'm in support of Councilman Jordan's, where we don't start adding a little tidbits here and there and it's getting out of proportion. I like to see it exactly the way it was said and then changed and then come back.
How about this? What if we were to request just a review, and instead of the blanket statement that the board was in support, maybe just having a comment that the board discussed A, B, C, and D? Maybe just a couple of the highlights of that discussion.
As for Mac Rossi, I'm for that, as long as we keep it in the same context. Excuse me.
So would you mind revising your motion that maybe we just have the minutes reviewed and updated to highlight the specific topics that were addressed?
That sounds like a nice motion. Thank you for doing it for me.
And can I get a second?
I'll second the motion. Carol Crane.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, so with that, and I do appreciate actually just taking a moment to discuss that, you guys. I know that it's not usually something that we get stuck on our agenda, but I think it's important that we all kind of review and understand what we're doing here. So moving on to the next item, which is the council liaison report for general announcements and information items only.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will be brief. I know you got some development issues, which I know everybody's eager to learn a little bit more about. So the first thing I think this board will be very interested in is, we know that housing is a huge issue in our community. I think today we just heard a outrageous median home price of $625,000. Somebody correct me if I got that wrong. It was a crazy high number, and we know that housing stock is significantly behind where we need to be to stabilize that. The mayor has asked for a housing forum that will be on February the 22nd from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Whether or not that meeting will be in person or purely virtual is still not been decided. We're trending in the right direction, and I think that's still up in the air. Even if it's in person, my understanding is there will still be a virtual option, so you'll still be able to zoom in and participate.
Ask her about that committee.
So
ask her about
that is on the 22nd from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Looking forward to getting some specifics out of that, actionable items. That'll be really great. There was a recent meeting that a number of our board members and those that spoke during public comment attended, related to a number of downtown issues. And it was a great, huge shout out to Eric LaRude and his IT folks and everybody that pulled that together. It had a number of residents from a number of the condo facilities downtown, and they had, my gosh, I don't know how long the meeting was, 2 or 3 hours, and the mayor was on there and I was on there, some staff was on there, and there was just a myriad of questions from everything from crime and police to Jacobs to traffic to the Portland Loo to you name it. It was all on there, and I thought that forum was incredible to get the downtown residents' questions answered, and I thought it was very successful. And thank you again, Eric, for pulling that together with a broad spectrum of issues. And I'm hoping maybe we can continue with those types of things in the future, because I did think it was very, very beneficial. Other than that, I don't really, let me see here. We got the NAB training that's in March. That'll be great. That will help to, I know there's a number of new NAB members across the city, and that will help with a lot of the questions people are having related to kind of what is the role of a NAB member? What is the, what is the largest benefit that each of you have individually with where you reside within the ward to bring to your recommendations to the council as an advisory board? I don't think anybody's anticipating any of you are lawyers or planners and know every ins and out of every little thing. And that's kind of not what the anticipated role is. It's more advocating for your neighborhood and your neighbors. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's very exciting. Other than that, if anybody has any questions on anything else Ward 5 related, I'm happy to take a shot at an answer.
Thank you. It looks like we have a question from an LH, which if my notes are correct, that might be Lisa Hill. She's asking Councilwoman Jardin, what happened to staff posting answers to the neon line questions? Last I checked, answers had not yet been posted.
So they answered all the questions that had been submitted up to the forum, the January forum. My understanding, and Amy, I don't know if you've got any current up to the minute response to this. I do know that there were hundreds and hundreds of questions asked during that forum. Staff is still putting together all of those answers. As you can imagine, they were very diverse and some of them very complex. So Amy, I know that they're trying to get that out just as quickly as possible, but they want to make sure everything is thorough and robust and accurate. Do we have any update?
This is Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the
Oh,
record.
Brooke.
So I'm on here. I was on, many of you saw me on the neon line discussion. I am actually currently working on those questions now. We had well over 200 questions on that. Staff wants to make sure that we're answering them thoroughly and completely. So we're kind of everyone's reviewing them and we're going forward. Initially, we thought we'd be able to get them out in a week, but with the amount of questions and the community involvement we had that night, we were really just trying to get those out. So we'd anticipate you seeing those within the next week to 10 days.
Great, thank you. Hopefully, Lisa, that answers your question. She says, thanks.
Thank you for jumping in there, Brooklyn. I saw your hand up and I wasn't sure exactly how to get to you. So I appreciate you just jumping in. Okay. I do still show Lisa has her hand up. Lisa, I'm hoping with your thanks that you got your question answered. I don't see any other questions here.
I have my hand up.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you. Council member, there's a committee, back to housing again. There's supposed to be a city committee called Tenants, Issues and Concerns that would be addressing housing issues for all participants in the city, but you never see anything about that. Is that a viable committee or is that something that is just on hold?
You know what? I wasn't a member of that. I know that it met once or twice. Amy, I don't know if you have any other update. I know that it had to, the provisions of it had to have met within a certain deadline. And I think that deadline for them having met has come and gone. But that's a good question for the housing forum on the 22nd. I don't have any, I'm sorry, I don't have any specific.
You have heard of it. You have heard of it. It was at one point a viable committee and possibly will be again. Okay. I'm just wondering, because that was, that's the big issue, and that would be a really important committee to have for information.
Yeah, I know COVID kept people from meeting for when we were really kind of in the lockdown period. So I'm not really sure what the status is. So I have to kind of get back to you on that one. But thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that we have everything done. I do want to just really quickly take a moment, if you don't mind, Councilmember Neoma. Thank you, Councilwoman Jordan, for your kind comments about the Downtown Reno residents meeting last Thursday. And thanks to you for participating. That is from Eric LaRude. So just making sure that we're covering all bases here as they're coming in. Seeing no other hands or questions, we'll move on to our next item, which is A6, which is a staff liaison report.
Amy Pennington for the record. I don't have too much to report on other than just thank you so much for your patience as we are still, some of this technology can be a lot of moving parts at one time. So just thank you everyone for your patience on the Zoom calls. And yes, we will be having a date coming to you very soon for the March training, which will include lots of different aspects of how to participate in a NAB board, what the purpose of being a NAB member is. And we'll have some guidance from our clerk's office, our attorney's office, the planning team. So it'll be just a good time to understand the scope of being a NAB member. And I hope that will be helpful to everybody. And other than that, and then I'll just make one comment for just in general, if anyone is here to present on something and I haven't moved you to a panelist when it comes time for your item, feel free to raise your hand because sometimes there's people whose names I didn't originally have on my list. And so just help me out if you are here and need to be part of a presentation. And with that, does anyone have any questions for me?
Just appreciation for you doing this crash course with us on this new technology. This has been fun.
Yes, my pleasure.
Okay, I think we're ready to go ahead and move on to our business items. Okay, so the first item will be B1, which is our Regional Transportation Commission update on the McCarran Boulevard Corridor Study, evaluating transportation safety and operations along the entire McCarran Loop and other projects within Ward 5. This presentation is by RTC and it's for discussion only.
Thank you, Madam Chair and
Welcome.
members of the board. Everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes. My name is Dan Dengis. I'm the Director of Planning for RTC for the record. And if you bear with me for a minute, I'd like to see if I can share my screen and have a brief presentation. Okay. And can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So just a little background. We are coordinating with NDOT, the Nevada Department of Transportation, on this McCarran Boulevard corridor study. We are actually looking at the entire McCarran Loop, so it's no small feat or undertaking. They did approach us, and the RTC that is, and asked if we would mind taking the lead, but they're very much involved in this process. McCarran is owned and operated by NDOT, the entire loop. And so we kicked off the study, probably a couple months ago. We did a lot of data collection in the meantime, and I'll go over some of that with you. But essentially, what we're looking at is trying to identify what the vision or visions and kind of the characteristics of the roadway and how it might best function to suit the surrounding land use. And so, as probably all of you are familiar with, McCarran, the character, the landscape really varies over the entire loop. So we're kind of looking at specific segments, but also in the greater context of, what does this road serve and what's its purpose for our region. We're looking at, gaps in connectivity, and this could be across all modes. We're looking at safety and operation issues. And so through this process, we hope to identify some short and probably longer term improvements that we might be able to implement. And again, when I say we, it's kind of the collective we. This is, with NDOT and RTC both coordinating on this, identifying priorities and funding strategies. Some of it, if there's a need to develop some capacity improvements, those are expensive, so they'll probably take longer to implement. But this is what we hope to sort throughout this whole process. In the meantime, as we're developing this, we intend to make public involvement a part of the entire process. We haven't really officially gone out to the public yet because we're still kind of in the data collection phase, but we are looking to do that, initiate that next week through a variety of different formats. And so this chart at the bottom just kind of shows a timeline once we identify these projects. Again, depending on the type of improvement it is, if it is a capacity related improvement, we'll probably have to go through more of an environmental process. If it's something short term, like operational improvements at the intersection, that doesn't really require, in general, much environmental work. So obviously any design or right of way, we'll have to coordinate with utilities, and then we can finally get to construction on some of these improvements. So it's, I anticipate that some things will be implemented sooner than later, but it'll be kind of an ongoing process. And we very much want this study to be kind of a living document. So I'm sure this is probably, not lost in anybody. Obviously, most people are familiar with Mccarran Loop. It's one of the biggest arterials in our region. So that's our study limits. We're not reinventing the wheel here either. There's been several kind of, I would say, more piecemeal type studies that have been conducted over the past few years. You can see all the dates there, but looking at intersection control evaluations, or ICE is what they call it in the engineering world, at specific intersections. NDOT has also conducted a couple of safety management plans. One in East Mccarran, which is really kind of in the Sparks region, and then North Mccarran, which is right in the middle of this ward. So this really, we have to look how it ties in with, how it interfaces with the whole freeway system. Mccarran touches I-80 and I-580 and 395. So these are things that need to be considered in terms of, how traffic interacts at those interchanges. And then, of course, with all the development that's occurred in the past and pending, a lot of those do have traffic impact studies that they're required to submit. So trying to gather all that information and glean what we can and kind of take a cumulative look at those things. And then last but not least is we do have the RTC develops a regional transportation plan, or RTP as we call it. We have to look out at a minimum of a 20-year planning horizon. It's actually a federal requirement. So we most recently adopted our 2050 RTP almost a year ago, coming up on a year now. So there's some proposed projects that have been identified in that document as well. And again, just looking at kind of the characteristics of Mccarran. This is obviously a simplification, but really we wanted to kind of break it down just to see, what are kind of the considerations when we're looking at this as a whole. So kind of identified 4 major areas, those being residential areas, those, junctions with the freeway that I mentioned earlier. Obviously the airport is a big factor, and, any improvements, we are kind of somewhat limited to what we might be able to do there just because of regulations that are associated with FAA and around the airport property. And then obviously the University of Nevada campus plays an integral role in this as well. And we can't really talk about transportation without the surrounding land use. This is a little bit more into the weeds basically from the last slide, but you can see that the predominant land uses are primarily single-family residential and commercial. We have certainly a lot of other industrial, some pending projects that are going to be adding some industrial square footage right along the corridor. There's a surprising number of parks and open spaces when you really kind of step back and look at the big picture, that Mccarran goes right up against or right through in some cases. And of course, as I mentioned, the airport and the university. Just looking at kind of the characteristics of the roadway itself, in a federal functional classification, Federal Highway Administration likes to kind of assign categories to different roadway types. Mccarran is what we call a principal arterial. And, in the bullet points here, just kind of identifies some of those characteristics that are typically associated with that type of roadway. And looking at the posted speed limits, it generally ranges from 40 to 50 miles per hour. Really, the only place where it's 40 is kind of just north of the freeway in Sparks. Otherwise, it's generally 45 to 50. Obviously, as probably many of you can attest, some places it feels like that's just advisory. We do have some speeding issues, and they tend to be in the areas that are less congested, depending on the time of day. Overall, the access management is pretty good in most areas. There are limited driveways, and the signals are spaced fairly well. I can't say that blanketly across the whole corridor, but we do have a lot of right in, right out type intersections. So those are definitely safer in general, but obviously there's some problem areas that we know of. And just looking at some issues that have risen to the top lately, a lot of development questions around the lakeside kind of Kitski area in between there and Plumas. So, just some questions that have come up are, how might this higher density development impact traffic and capacity on the roadway? And then we know that there's some issues, particularly some safety and operations issues in Sparks on, basically between I-80 and Prater Way. It's not to say, again, we're not going to look at the, every segment of the Mccarran Boulevard, but those are just some of those that have risen to the top. And then looking at kind of our crash history, I won't go, read all these bullet points, but you can see in the heat map, where predominantly most of the crashes are occurring. It really is a telling picture, kind of really stands out. Again, that area near I-80 and Sparks, and also up by 395. And well, really all the interchanges really kind of pop out. And that might be a bigger indication of maybe how some of that ramp geometry is interfacing with Mccarran itself and the surface streets. The top crash locations and over this time period are as follows, and it does go from highest to lowest. So Pyramid Highway, that intersection was a top crash location out of all the intersections. I did want to note though, since RTC did the Mccarran Pyramid interchange reconstruction, there's been a marked noticeable drop post 2017 when those improvements were made. So happy to say that some of those improvements are already making a difference, and we're seeing that. So if we kind of take the next 5 years, that might drop off the list altogether, or certainly drop down a few. Just looking at existing pedestrian facilities, we want to look at not only if sidewalks or paths are there, but also kind of what the quality of that is. And really, I think these two pictures on the slide kind of demonstrate that pretty well. On the top picture, you have probably the minimum width sidewalk, and there is a shoulder there, but you have a sound wall or a fence on one side, and it just doesn't probably feel as comfortable as something like in the bottom picture where there's a nice kind of separated path and some landscaping. So we want to kind of look at that, make sure, identify any areas that are maybe have ADA accessibility concerns or are just not accessible, or any gaps. I mean, that's a big one too, is if you have two very nice pedestrian facilities, but a big gap in the middle, you know, and they're connecting to important destinations, those are the things we kind of want to address. I do want to say that just because we have a roadway doesn't necessarily mean we need to have a sidewalk everywhere. We want to do it where it's feasible, where it makes sense. So, you know, there might be some areas, and I'm kind of looking at, like, you know, Southwest Mccarran, where, you know, there's not really a lot of what I would say destinations, and really the grades are pretty tight. And so having a lack of sidewalks there is not necessarily a detriment when you don't have people using them in the first place, but we're going to really step back and take a holistic look at all of that. Again, with same with bicycle facilities, surprisingly, there is pretty much some sort of facility along the entire loop. There's kind of the gap in the area again on just north by 80 in Sparks. Again, though, those, just like sidewalks, there's varying levels of comfort. On the southeast portion, we have a really nice separated multi-use path. Other areas where there's just a bike lane that's basically just paved along high speeds. So we kind of want to look at that from a safety perspective as well. And then our transit, we do have a few stops where transit interfaces Mccarran. I do want to stress that, you know, we're not suggesting that there should be a transit route along all of Mccarran. I think the fixed routes have been laid out really thoughtful and intersect important areas of Mccarran where it's appropriate. You know, we get requests a lot to say, well, why don't you run transit along the entire loop? And we've actually looked into that. We've looked into, you know, ridership forecasts and just financial feasibility, and it really just doesn't pencil out. So I understand, you know, there's some areas that don't have as great of access to transit as others, but RTC is continually looking at, you know, where our efficient routes are, other types of services that we could provide to serve some of those areas where we don't have fixed routes. So, and this is really just a demonstration of what's existing today. So next steps, like I said, we've collected a lot of data, looked at traffic volumes and some of what we would call the level of service of intersections, looking to see how we could improve operations in places. A lot of times capacity doesn't mean adding a lane. It's just, you know, retiming the traffic signals or something like that. So we really want to start drilling down into some of the best fixes for some of the potential problem areas, looking at those gaps that I mentioned across all modes, looking at potential right-of-way opportunities, looking to, you know, again, relieve those congestion areas, excuse me, and kind of enhance connectivity overall. So I did mention we're gearing up to do some public outreach in the next month. We will have a website up and operational before then. We're working on a nice story map, if you're familiar with those, but really has a lot of nice exhibits that kind of walk through kind of what the vision and purpose of the study will be. And we're planning on doing virtual outreach. We'll have a nice platform, a couple videos people can watch, and some boards people can kind of explore on their own. And obviously we're available to answer any questions. I think there's some other folks that are presenting under this item. So I don't know if you want to take questions now or kind of hold off to the end. I do want to note that I have Chad Anson on the line too. He's the project manager on the consultant side, so he'll be available to help me out with any questions. That concludes my presentation.
Great.
Mac Rossi for the
Thank you,
record.
Daniel.
Mac Rossi.
Matt, could we hold off for?
Sure,
Could
go
we
ahead.
hold off on questions for just a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to hold off on questions until we get the full presentation, just because I feel like sometimes that answers some of the questions that arise. So Daniel, I think the first thing that we would like to just make sure that we're touching on is, are there any other transportation updates for Ward 5 besides just the Mccarran Loop?
Yeah, and I will jump in real quick if I can, and just note that we do have a transportation area study that we're looking at in the Verdi area. So Chair Borchard, as you remember, we presented over at the Verdi cab for the county, and we got some of the information out. We're not as far along with that study as this Mccarran one. We're kind of just getting into that initial data collection process, but that'll be another big one too, and we're certainly happy to bring that back to this board for any updates.
Great. And is that the only other transportation update in Ward 5? And thank you, by the way, Daniel. I do remember you guys presenting, and you did a very thorough job there as well. So
I think this is Amy Pennington.
Okay.
I believe that Lacey and Jeff both have some additional updates as well, transportation updates.
Okay, perfect.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lacey Tisler with the Nevada Department of Transportation, and I've been asked to speak on the Keystone Mccarran leadership area and what we have planned for that. Sadly, I was not able to get any visuals, so I'm hoping we can all paint pictures with our mind, and I apologize for that. It's my first NAB meeting, and we just had some internal struggles. Currently, we are doing a very small project at Keystone and Mccarran and at Las Brias and Mccarran. We don't want to do any major improvements because we want to work with the RTC, City of Reno, and the rest of our partners to make sure the entire Mccarran system is something that is good and viable for every member of our community. But in the short term, we're looking at the permanent installation of raised medians and an extension of left turn pockets on Mccarran between Keystone and Leadership. The extension of the permanent raised median island and the left turn pockets will prevent the left turn problem that you guys have been having and give the storage that's been needed. A lot of those left turn pockets have been a little bit skinny. And at Las Brias and Mccarran, there'll be another permanent installation of raised medians. And these will work within the limits of what we're doing with the Mccarran study. And they will be taking some of the long-term intersection improvements into consideration. And as a department, especially me from the safety side, we'll be looking, supporting those. I don't have any other updates from the department at this time.
Thank you so much, Lacey. Jeffrey?
Sure. So thanks, everybody. My name is Jeff Holbrecht. I work for the RTC as well. I work with Dan. And I am here to talk about the Kings Row Rehab project. And I can share my screen here real quick. Let's see. Do you guys see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, my name's Jeff. I'm the project manager for the Kings Row Rehab project. We have this project. It's actually 2 phases. We completed phase 1 last fall. It went from Keystone Avenue up to Wyoming. It was a really good project. It provided a lot of benefit to that corridor. If any of you drove that road at all often, it was in pretty bad shape, both the roadway asphalt as well as the sidewalks. And so what we did with this project is provide a whole new roadway that will last us a long time. We have all new sidewalks that are ADA compliant. And we also corrected the driveways, which that's really where you kind of feel the issue with ADA compliance, is at the driveways and the pedestrian ramps. We also had bike lanes that we were able to fit within the existing right of way. And just because Kings Row is a bit of an older road, we were able to kind of restripe and kind of reconfigure parts of the road by just maximizing the space, right? So we still have all the parking, on-street parking, the travel lanes, the center turn lane, but we were able to fit a bike lane in each direction. And then we also did some storm drain improvements for the city of Reno when we were in there doing all the roadway work. So it was a great project. We opened it up kind of late last year. And during that time, we were also kind of concurrently working on phase 2 of the project. So phase 2 is next bit from Wyoming Avenue, which is kind of in the middle of Kings Row between Keystone and McCarran. And then this phase is going to go all the way up to McCarran Boulevard. It's going to be the almost exact similar scope. There's a little bit of differences, but we're going to have a whole new roadway. We're going to do ADA improvements throughout the limits. Because this area is adjacent to Washoe County Schools, Mimi Tolles Elementary and Clayton Middle School, they've actually, the county school district has already done a lot of sidewalk improvements adjacent to their property. So in the scheme of our project, there's a little bit less sidewalk work, but anyways, we're still going to do all that throughout the rest of the corridor. We're also going to include some bulb sidewalks that access the schools. And so if you're familiar with those, they kind of encroach, the sidewalk encroaches into the travel lane, essentially where a vehicle could be parking, but they don't park because there's a crosswalk there. And it really is a safety benefit for pedestrians crossing the street. It kind of allows them a safe refuge to enter further into the street so that they're more visible in a safe location, and then they can safely cross. And it results in a shorter distance from, edge of curb to edge of curb, so they get through the roadway faster. We're also going to add another rapid rectangular flashing beacon. So there's already one a little bit further south of this photo, but we're going to add another one at this location. And so we'll have 2 crosswalks, and they'll both have the bulb outs, and they'll both have the RRFBs. And then this section of the corridor is a little bit narrower than the lower half. And so we're able to fit a bike lane only in the uphill direction. And so the downhill side will be striping it for a shared lane. So it would operate as it currently does. And then we have a little bit of storm drain improvements. And so, as I said earlier, this project's scheduled to get going in construction here pretty soon. A lot of the driver for our construction timing on this project is the school schedule. And so obviously when students are walking back and forth to class, we don't want to be doing construction work directly near them. So we're going to really segment and phase that work so that we do some work kind of in the northern half or I guess kind of northwestern half near McCarran Boulevard, and then the rest of it will be during that summer break for school. And we'll be obviously doing all the normal notifications that we do with construction of door hangers and kind of individual outreach as necessary. We've already done a lot of outreach to the corridor as a whole in advance of the project, but we'll obviously continue that through construction. And here's just a good, easy graphic to kind of help illustrate kind of the limits of this corridor. So Wyoming Avenue is down here on the lower right hand of our screen. Obviously, this is all Washoe County School District property, Clayton Middle School and Tolles Elementary. And then this is kind of the breaking point where that some of the work will happen earlier, and then the bulk of the work down by the schools will happen during the summer. And traffic control should be pretty similar to the last phase of the project, where we were able to accommodate 1 lane in each direction throughout the entire construction, just because this road is quite wide for the amount of traffic that goes on it. We did also accommodate on-street parking off work hours for those people who park on the street. So that was a good benefit for those direct residents directly adjacent to the construction project. So yeah, we're really ramping up and excited for this project. It's a great improvement to this corridor, and it's a really good project to just work on as a whole. So I think that might be, I don't know if there's anybody else presenting on transportation projects, but I'm happy to answer any questions on this one as well. But I know there were some questions for Dan potentially. So thanks.
Great, thank you, Jeffrey. Did we have any other updates, or was there anybody else from NDOT or RTC that had something to share? All right, seeing none, I think we'll open it up to some questions and answers, if you don't mind. We do have some hands raised, and then I will kind of chime in with some of the chat feature as well. So if there are questions that you prefer to just post, please feel free, and I'll be taking a look at those. It looks like Mac wanted to go first. Mac, please go ahead.
Thank you, Carly. For Mac Rossi, for the record. I I wanted to address, one of the reasons this presentation came is because I had asked for an update on, preferably for, I thank you very much for the full all-around view of McCarran. And going back to Ward 5, there was 3 issues that I addressed. One of them was, and I'll just give them to you, then you can answer them, whoever wants to answer. One of them was Keystone McCarran. That's been going on for, we addressed that over 3 years ago. And of course, we've had the virus and a few other things going on. But there was, at that time, there was 300 apartments up there on Independence Hill. And they were anticipating another 300 apartments. The reason I addressed it was that if you came out of that apartment complex, if you wanted to go left, you had to go right, join the traffic at 50 plus, get in the left-hand turn lane as quick as you can and make a U-turn going the other way. NDOT had at that time suggested they were talking about putting a roundabout there. We had suggested a traffic light, but they felt a roundabout was something more feasible and less expensive. The other issue was on 7th and McCarran. There's a bus stop that blocks the lane coming onto 7th Street that comes out of 3 sections, 2 of NDOT and 1 of the RTC, that a bus stops there and traffic backs up almost where they're backed up into McCarran, waiting for the bus to go. We had requested possibly to review and see about moving that bus stop about 60 feet on the other side of the driveway of the shopping center. And they were going to check to see, NDOT was going to check to see, or RTC was going to check to see if that was feasible to move the bus stop, if that was okay with the merchants that were in that shopping center. The third item was, it came up just within the last year, was on Highway 80 going west, where you have the exit for 3 and 4. In between that, they have now built homes that back up right to the freeway that are about 50 to 60 feet below the highway with no guardrail. We had been requesting a guardrail from you folks and haven't heard anything on that. It's from NDOT. Since you say that you're representing NDOT, I'd like to see these things addressed. And I'm sorry that I'm highlighting it just in that Ward 5 area, but this has been going on for almost 3 years now. So I'll let you address what you feel you'd like to.
So I'll start that. There's a lot of layers to the Keystone Leadership intersection. Dan mentioned quite a bit of those in his analysis on what they're looking at the McCarran Ring Road study. And you mentioned as well that some of that development is not happening. It's not happening currently. So NDOT, RTC, and City of Reno are working together and having that conversation as we're looking at the study. And I don't think we have an answer to what is the appropriate intersection control there yet. Dan or somebody from the City of Reno can continue on that, but I think that development, we need more information about that development and to move forward on that. Dan and I did have some conversations about the bus stop with the RTC. That's a new one to me. It's a new one to you as well, right, Dan?
Yeah, I could chime in.
Go ahead.
Just kind of to your earlier comment too, just to follow on with that, Lacey. You know, I think too, I understand there's probably some frustration. There's been a few, well, I showed in my presentation, there's been a few safety management plans and stuff done in certain areas of McCarran. And I think really NDOT's perspective is, you know, they started doing some of these piecemeal type improvements without really kind of looking at the big picture. So I think that's where the request came, to kind of take a step back and look at the loop as a whole, or at least more, you know, shorter segments of it. So I'm not saying that, you know, we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. I think there's probably some very good recommendations to come in there. But I think we're just wanting to, you know, go through this process to kind of look at the larger segments and then try to determine if that's still the best option, or if there's something else that could be done to kind of address some of those issues. So definitely more to come on that. And I certainly understand the frustration. I know it's been, as you mentioned, 3 years now. And just real briefly on the bus stop, I have been in contact with our public transportation staff, and so they are looking into that. I might require an easement, but we definitely need to contact that property owner to move that bus stop. There is some hesitation sometimes to move bus stops further away from intersection, just because it sometimes it can encourage jaywalking, and so we have to kind of take that into consideration too. Where a passenger's getting off, some people are just more likely to take their chances to cross the street as opposed to walking to an intersection if it's, much further. And I know we're only talking, probably what, 40, I forget how far you said, but it's just things we need to consider. But I will try to follow up with our staff and get a more solid answer to that.
Highway 80? Who would address
Highway
that?
8. Highway 80. I learned about that last week from Amy. Now that I've got the full scope of your question, I will dig into our designers and get an answer. And your request seems reasonable on the surface, but I will definitely dig into it and get back to you.
Okay, I would like to see it before I retire off the NAB to see if something gets done here. It's been 3 years, and I know I'm repeating myself, but things are still developing and still there's problems. And I realize you got the whole Mccarran to deal with as far as you folks, but again, I'm kind of highlighting on Ward 5, and that's what my biggest concern was. So I'd appreciate maybe somebody stepping on the gas a little. Thank you.
That's a reasonable request, and
okay, thank you.
I will do what I can.
Thanks so much, Mac. I do want to just chime in if I could really quickly too, just from having a little bit of experience with this in the past weeks or month, I should say, of having the presentation by RTC at the Verdi West Truckee Meadows cab for the Washoe County. Very thorough information, and I'm very encouraged by their idea and desire to have community input. So, just sharing that, and I know that Daniel touched on it, but once we got into it a little bit more in depth, they are very eager to hear from the public and what some of those problem areas are. So just to throw it out there on the record that we should all definitely get engaged and involved once that website is up and running and able to give feedback. So with that, I'll keep moving along here. We do have a question or a hand raised from Art Rangel. So Amy, if we could allow him to speak.
Thank you. Actually, Daniel, you and I have been playing phone tag. And your presentation kind of related to part of my question. And it has to do, especially given the tremendous amount of growth that's going on in the region. It has to do with the modeling that RTC uses. And sounds like you do the typical top modeling where you use the master plans from Reno, Sparks, and the county. You look at intensities and densities to those respective plans, and then kind of model based on that. I know that's very typical, but the thing that I think, from my perspective, is problematic, especially in the case of Reno, where in certain parts of Reno, in the downtown area, there's no limit, height limits. Therefore, how do you justify? First question is, how do you compute densities and intensities in a format like that? The second question has to do with traffic studies. In my experience, in my years of working in this arena, when you do a traffic study, you do the cumulative impacts. In other words, you don't only look at the project that's being submitted to the city, you looked at other projects that are either that are in the mill, so that you can identify what impacts those respective projects are generated. Do your jurisdictions do cumulative impact analysis when they submit a traffic study?
Yeah, thank you, Art. I appreciate your questions. And just a little background on our travel demand model. So we do work very closely with our partners at Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. They actually do provide us kind of a land use forecast that we use to kind of populate our model, input all that data. So we look at we look at existing and forecasted households, sizes, and employment, and they very much take into account the levels of density that can be built in a certain area on a parcel. And I agree it's probably a little more challenging downtown, but fortunately we do have, you know, more infrastructure available there too. And they've kind of, and I don't want to speak on their behalf because I'm sure I'll get it wrong, but they've kind of identified these different tiers for basically development intensity where they'd like to prioritize growth. And again, we work closely with them. They revise their estimates every 2 years. So it's, you know, somewhat of a moving target, but we're always taking a look at that. We're required to update our long range plan every 4 years. And every time we do so, we do update our travel demand model too. So, you know, the best I could say is, you know, we take all the information that's available to us at the time. And we do rely on multiple sources. So we use a state demographer. We use, I believe, Woods and Pool, which is a private provider of some of that forecast data, and US Census data. And so TMRPA comes up with those growth tracks, and then they're tasked with kind of disaggregating that growth in what we call traffic analysis zones for our model. So sorry to get too in the weeds there, but and then to your second question about traffic impact studies, we fortunately are involved in the development review process. We do receive proposed applications and do offer comments as an agency for RTC. You know, when we do look at those traffic impact studies, I would agree with you. You know, a lot of times it's just kind of looking at what the development is expected to produce, or, you know, all the trips generated from a specific development, but doesn't always, I think, consider, you know, maybe what the neighbors are proposing as far as development. So I don't know that I have a great answer for that, and I don't want to put city staff on the spot, but if Brooke or I think Kurt are on the line, if they have any other insight into how they condition those, I you know, defer to them.
Thank you.
This is Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the record. I can speak briefly as largely what I see as entitled projects. And so when we're looking at overall traffic impacts, a number of those will have on-site traffic, things that we're requiring egress, some of the size of roadways and things that we're doing there. But oftentimes we, if we are seeing additional or off-site impacts, we can condition that those off-site improvements be done through that agreement of a tentative map or other process. So we do have ways to ensure that that development is paying. If those needs are not there, that development is paying to ensure that those levels of service and other things are being met.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, it looks like we do have a question from Lisa Hill. She is asking, how will RTC look at the area in which Mccarran bisects Rancho San Rafael, where pedestrians and bikes cross to get from one side of the park to the other? The second part of that question is, how tall will the permit barriers near Keystone and North Mccarran be? And an example of what safety measures are envisioned in the park, just as a side note. And then last question is, can something be done sooner rather than later at Keystone? NAB has been asking for help over 10 years, and what is the time frame?
Yeah, all good questions. Again, I think it's going to come down to like, what's the best solution there? Clearly, you know, any crossings we have like that, it's got to be safe. And so I think we're going to look at all options on the table when we're going through this analysis. You know, is it just pedestrian flashers? Is it a pedestrian only bridge? You know, something like that to really connect people to those assets and resources in a safe manner. And you know, I don't know if I'm familiar with the permanent barrier heights. Is that something, Lacey, you have any insight on? Okay, just want to make sure. And Chad, please feel free to chime in if you have some insights on this as well. Not to put you on the spot either.
No, no worries. No, I mean, I'm kind of looking at the area there at the park now. I mean, they do have kind of an underpass. I mean, we will look at how to keep connectivity. That's kind of a big thing with us is in this study is trying to provide connectivity where it makes sense. Obviously, if we're getting a lot of folks crossing at grade over Mccarran, that's a bad situation. And we want to see what we can do to avoid that, whether it be pedestrian barriers, things of those nature. We would like people keep, if there is an existing grade separation, whether it be under Mccarran or over, that's would be the focus, especially at some of the speeds on that standpoint. But definitely looking at the pedestrians is definitely going to be a key component of the study. And if there's specific concerns that you've seen out there, if you could please, you let myself or Dan know, because those are the things that the data may not show. We have tons of data, but the data doesn't show near misses. And that's kind of a thing we've been preaching lately is we see the crashes through the crash data, but we don't see those near misses, the close accidents, because those don't ever get documented. And it'd be great to solve those problems before they do have to be documented.
And Lisa, I know you and I had chatted before, and I am documenting all requests, concerns that I get. So I've been working with Chad. We're kind of keeping a list so that once we start really digging into this, we can refer back to all those notes and really kind of look at what the issues are and what potential solutions are. I know you've been waiting, and I know we've had that discussion, and I certainly understand the frustration. But please know that, we aren't being dismissive of any comments. We're taking it seriously, and I think we'll have some at least proposed solutions in the very near future. And one of the things I'm really hoping to get out of the study, we've still got a few months before it's complete, but again, talking about some of those shorter term improvements we can do. I think that's the hope of both RTC and NDOT is to really hit the ground running and really start implementing what we can. Some of the low hanging fruit, if you will, but also really programming out some of those longer term, more capital intensive projects.
I can speak for NDOT with the new national push with the national safety strategy released by the federal level. We're embracing that at the department level. We do have some additional safety funding and looking forward to some of these short-term improvements that we can roll out and that are going to be consistent for the entire corridor.
Wonderful. Just to kind of follow up with some of her comments, she did add in, that the cars currently run over the barriers that are in place. So just a comment from her. And then, of course, you guys threw out your contact information. I'm hoping maybe we can post those, Amy, in the comments just for people's notations, should they need to email or contact these individuals. I think that would be beneficial for all of us. And then just kind of following up on what you just said, and again, just having a little bit of experience with this discussion thus far. I think it was really stressed in our last review, specifically for Verdi, that we know that there are some low hanging fruit, shorter term projects that could be addressed right away, but that there are some more imperative issues that may need to be looked at sooner. So just really encourage you guys to kind of take a look at some of those projects that are, maybe of more of a safety hazard than, I appreciate they might be considered a longer term project, but immediacy of having some safety regulations put in place, even if it's short term, would be really great. And for all of those on the line, the contact information is within the chat at this point. So please feel free to take a look at those. I'm going to back up here just a little bit. It looks like Janice. Go ahead. Sorry, somebody.
This is Vice Mayor Jordan. May I speak?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. I have been sitting here watching this presentation and feeling my blood pressure rise. And let me tell you, as frustrated as Lisa Hill, as a huge community advocate, has been for the entire 10 years I've been on the council, I know she and Mac have been doing this longer than I've been on council. And I am really feeling like we are getting we need to study some more, some bigger, some longer as a means to kick the can. I hope that is not the case. We have been advocating for even interim effective solutions for these areas for my entire years. And the fact that I am on the city council and the chair of RTC and have not, we did this safety study for these areas, the SMP, I don't know, year and a half ago. I get that we don't want to do something that we have to do again down the road, but I am supremely frustrated that there has not been improvements made to these areas. This is something that I have, and this ward has advocated for not even the massive, pedestrian cycling bridge amenity fixes, which now that's a must. I mean, if we're going to use McCarran as a capacity road, which we are, it is a capacity road. Do I think that road should be all things to all users at all times, meaning, bike lanes everywhere on it? But my goodness, we have to face the realities that there are people crossing McCarran, which is a high-speed, high-width road, and we are going to run into the Bonanza Casino death issue in this area. And this is a plea to RTC and to NDOT to please get with some sufficient interim solutions for these areas until the bigger global fix can be made. I am sorry, I am not someone who tends to get frustrated like this, but I am frustrated. And so please, with everybody, all of the people that appear to have the same vision of acting and that sort of thing, Chad and Lacey and Dan, please hear this loud and clear. We got to have a solution, and sooner rather than later. Thank you for allowing me to vent a bit.
I'm going to say thank you for that.
Absolutely.
From the department. You're not the only area that's been saying that. And I will say that is something I'm trying to do in my position. I've been here less than 2 years. Thank you. I am moving with the NDOT machine, but I will do what I can for you.
Fabulous.
Likewise, council member. This is a priority. I think not only to RTC but NDOT as well, and we really do want to come out with some concrete, no pun intended, solutions and start getting those implemented.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving on here. We do have just a couple more questions, you guys. Janice Sangster is asking, do your traffic studies grade traffic intersections?
So at least through the McCarran study, we are looking at what's called a level of service. And that is kind of, it's easiest probably to describe as kind of a letter grade to how well an intersection is functioning. And so we are looking at existing, but also looking at forecasting. We're looking at those forecasted traffic volumes that I spoke about with our travel demand model, plugging those in and seeing, what impacts those might have in the future. So we could have an intersection that's fully functioning at acceptable levels now, but depending on what our future growth looks like, that could fail in 15 years, 20 years. So we're not just looking at how things are currently working, but we're looking into the future as well. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Question for city staff. Do you consider typical cumulative impacts from other projects in the mill in your traffic analysis? This is a typical planning policy. That is from Art Ringel.
Yeah, Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner, for the record. Now that really depends on the size of project that we're seeing. So we have triggers that kick off a traffic study, a traffic letter, or a traffic report. So those are all different levels of information that we're getting based on the size of development and what's being requested. So from that, those reports do look at the traffic that's coming in, and we often know other developments are coming in, and we'll ask that traffic to be modified to say, wait, we have a development here that needs to be considered, but we can only really consider what we have in the pipeline. It's a really challenging thing to do. We rely more, once again, on regional to say, here's our overall traffic volumes in RTC and our partner agencies to say, here's where our big main connection roads are going to be. And then we really kind of fine tune as development comes in. If that's helpful and answers the question.
Thank you. Okay, we have a comment from Lisa Hill, just following up on some of her questions, and then of course following up with Councilwoman Jardin's comments. Just said amen, Neoma, which I think we can all appreciate. I think Neoma kind of took the words out of my mouth there on kind of the low hanging fruit item, you know, that some of these items have been in the works for many, many years, and I'm hoping that those can be addressed first. But Janice Sangster also is following up with, what is the Reno Police Department cooperation and enforcement? Cross Mccarran twice today at Mayan. Scary. No regard to red lights. Are the traffic counters on Mayan and Sierra Highlands put out by NDOT recently part of this? Two-part question, it looks like. So the first question is the Reno Police Department cooperation and enforcement.
I think we'd have to let Reno and the police department speak specifically to that.
I can give some feedback on that. Thank you. You know, this is kind of like every traffic violation enforcement issue that we suffer with in our communities, and it doesn't matter if it's Mccarran or a neighborhood road. RPD goes out and does traffic enforcement surges, that's probably not the right word, but they do operatives to try to curtail people from doing exactly what you're saying, the constant running of the red light or taking the wrong left over a median and all those things that they're not supposed to be doing. And it works while they're there. Some people improve their behavior for a smidge. And then RPD, with their limited resources, they can't just be positioned there forever. They have to move on to other hotspots, and people fall back into their prior patterns. And that's just a sad reality of kind of our behaviors when it comes to driving, say ours, some's driving. And so we are trying to find different ways of creatively changing people's behavior in that regard. I know that the discussion of traffic cameras comes up with great regularity. That comes with cons of, you know, is there a privacy invasion, sort of taking a picture of your license plate, you know, sort of thing going on. It's a little precarious as well. But we're always looking for ways to get people to not do those things. But the best thing is if you see an intersection, a neighborhood or whatever, where it's a certain time of day, it's a certain day of the week, or it's a certain vehicle. And what I mean by that is if you see a company vehicle or truck or whatever that's consistently blowing through the lights or doing something illegal, call Reno Direct. 334-INFO and report that information, because what that does, it allows RPD to deploy their resources most efficiently in areas where we're seeing these sort of repeat offenders, traffic violations. And it lets them really hone in on the time of day and the day of the week. So they're not just sitting out there on a Tuesday afternoon when the incidents are occurring at 8 a.m. on a Monday. So I just encourage everybody, if you're witnessing it, call 334-INFO. It's a non-emergency line. Report it. It logs it. It's great data to have absent a cop sitting there 24/7.
May I, and this is a little off track, but this is something that I've been trying to push through the department and all of our partners. I manage the strategic highway safety plan for the state of Nevada. And recently we brought in 2 more E's, and one of them is everyone. And right now we know that we have an enforcement problem. We have that enforcement problem statewide. We also have the highest fatal rate that we've seen in years. So my ask to everyone that I can talk to is can you talk to everyone you know about this and ask them to talk to people? Because that's going to be our first best step right now, is just raising the awareness of the problem, because we know we don't have an enforcement. We have an enforcement issue right now. So if we can build our personal accountability through our relationships, maybe we'll get that one red light runner stopped. So, sorry. Thank you for letting me take that.
I'm with, and I'm not above shaming people either, by the way.
That's okay.
Thanks, Carly, for letting me chime in. Thank you.
No, I appreciate the discussion. I do want to move on if we could. So I'll ask anybody else that has something that they would like to say to raise their hand or go ahead and throw in your comment. While I'm looking and waiting for that, I will just throw in, if I may, segue back to some of the questions and comments that were directed to city staff. And this is just from my own frustrations over the years, going back to the idea that these traffic studies are not accumulative. We have found that multiple times, and actually one of my organizations actually went into our own pocket and paid for a separate traffic study or an analysis of the traffic studies, because it was really important to us to have that accumulative, true and honest, what are the improvements that need to be made for the traffic that's anticipated. Obviously, we know that's not going to be put in place prior to development, but knowing when and what has to occur is really important. And I just really encourage some better traffic studies out of these developers in the future. I feel like that needs to be said. It's just been disappointing the last 5 or 6 years, personal opinion. That's not on RTC or NDOT or the city. I would encourage maybe some city solicitations of traffic studies rather than developer driven. I don't see any more comments, so let's go ahead and move on. We've got 2 more presentations, you guys. We're moving on to development projects. The first one will be LDC 22-00045, which is Meridian 120 South Open Space. This is a request for a master plan amendment from 8.3 acres of mixed employment to parks, greenways, and open space. And I will let the rest of that description be covered in a presentation.
Garrett, are you with us?
I am now. Hi there. Can you hear me? May I proceed, Madam Chair?
Yep, you're ready to go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen here.
Looks good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. For the record, Garrett Gordon, tonight representing BT South LLC. So before you is comment on a master plan amendment. The parcel in question is out in the Mortensen Garrison area and relates to the Meridian 120 South tentative map. The parcel is 80 acres, which was part of that tentative map approval. And you can see here, I'm outlining it is the subject parcel. You can see it has numerous master plan designations. The one we're talking about tonight is this one here, about 8.2 acres here in purple. That's currently master planned mixed employment and zoned industrial. And it'll be important as I go forward, you can see what it's surrounded by, open space and greenways. When the city council approved the tentative map back in 2020, one of the conditions was here, number 28 that I've highlighted, that says prior to an application for any final map, an application to rezone that 8.3 acres of industrial shall be rezoned to open space. And the city council must approve that rezoning before recording any final map. So that's why I'm before you tonight and will be before the city council to not only remaster plan this 8 acres, but it will be rezoned as well, or at least we're requesting it be rezoned to open space pursuant to this condition. I do believe, Madam Chair, gosh, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, the rezoning came before you, but tonight is the master plan request. And you can see and hear in the Mortenson Garrison neighborhood plan, the master plan designations of mixed employment and parks, greenways, and open space. Everywhere else in the city under mixed employment master plan, you can also have parks and open space zoning, but not in the Mortenson Garrison plan. For mixed employment, you can only have industrial. So in order to meet that condition, rezone this 8 acres industrial, greenways and open space, it also requires a master plan amendment to parks, greenways, and open space. So the current area is zoned mixed employment, is master plan mixed employment and zoned industrial. The request is to change that to open space. So we'll have an open space master plan designation and an open space zoning designation in compliance with the tentative map conditions. And certainly you can see here, it's surrounded by open space. So it makes sense. And council was very wise in their recommendation to go ahead and rezone that rezone that 8 acres to open space. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Pretty straightforward request. Thank you again, Madam Chair, for the time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Okay, do we have any questions or discussions amongst the board members? I don't see any hands. I don't see any hands within the attendees. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hands. I will just, if I may, throw in my 2 cents here that this has been reviewed and analyzed, obviously, since, well, really 2019. And we were very appreciative that this was a condition of approval. It just makes sense. I think it didn't make sense to anybody that's looked at this project since day one that that would be industrially zoned. Nobody really understood the origin for that. So I think it just is straightforward. And I do hear somebody chiming in. No? Okay. Well, then I will go ahead and encourage everybody. I assume, Amy, that we need to complete our forms for this project, which would be our project review form. Those can be done online. I don't know if it's beneficial, Amy, to send up a link or if everybody has access to that via email, but please, I encourage you to fill that out as NAB members and make sure that you put in your comments. Moving on to the next item, if I may. I'm looking good.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair.
We have.
Oop, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again, Madam Chair. Again, this is Garrett Gordon for the record. I'll be presenting on this item as well. Share my screen.
Great.
I'm beginning. We good to go?
I can see it.
Great.
I'm saying nods. Perfect. Again, for the record, Garrett Gordon, thank you very much for having me tonight on the special use permit request. Let me say that this project is not in Ward 5, but certainly myself and Jacobs made a commitment to Council Member Jordan, as did I the last time I was before Ward 5, to make sure we bring any entitlement requests not only to the Ward 1 NAB, but given the proximity of Ward 5, to also come before you. So this project did go before Ward 1 last week and before you tonight. I also made a request again, keeping our commitment for the public outreach to be on the Montage HOA agenda. I've been working with Mr. LaRue, and hopefully he can find some time for us to present and get some input as well. So the existing conditions, the subject parcel is parcels are just over 2 acres, 2.3 acres. It's this rectangle area here, which is bordered by 4th Street to the north, Washington Street to the west, and then Ralston Street to the east, and bordered here along the easterly border with 2 existing parking lots. This area is zoned northwest quadrant, mixed use downtown district. Existing Glow Plaza. So what's currently there? There's currently the Glow Plaza. I can say last year when this Glow Plaza was open, and it didn't require any entitlement, at least before this body or council, because it was operating under the city's special activity permit process. There were 22 events last year from July to September of 2021, 11 weeks. There was live music every Friday and Saturday night. And I can say it was a kind of success of getting folks and locals back down to West 4th Street. Each of these events had about 100 to 150 people. I think it started a little smaller, but as the summer went on and the fall went on, it definitely grew. You can see some pictures here of the Glow Plaza Arch. There were some food trucks. There was the Airstream bar provided by the Sands, seating, umbrellas, a stage for some small concerts. Folks enjoyed the Reno's Neon Line, the lighting here, along with some of the artwork and replica signs. So it was a success, kind of a baby step to get some entertainment and live entertainment again going along West 4th Street. And now we're asking to expand that into the proposed festival grounds. So you can see here the Glow Plaza area, which is currently constructed and held those events last summer and fall. We're proposing it to expand into this festival area. The festival area will include a stage over on the westerly portion of the property, fully landscaped, fully paved, fully improved. As you head over here to the east side of the grounds, a shade structure. We heard last summer that more shade was definitely needed. So there might be some just standing room, there might be some seating, there might be some bars or food in the shading area. But again, providing some shade to the patrons will be important. So this outdoor kind of live entertainment proposal requires a conditional use permit. So that's why I'm before you. We're scheduled for the Reno Planning Commission the first week of March, who would have final approval on this application. The specific request is a use permit for amusement or recreation outside, as well as a live entertainment. It's more planned for, again, like festivals. There won't be, at least at this point, any kind of ticketed events or ticketed concerts. It'll be open to the public. There'll be food, there'll be beverages. Again, people can come and go as they please, depending on the events. Maybe one-day event or a weekend event, just depending on the plan and the time of year. So some more specifics. It's an expansion of the existing Glow Plaza into the expanded festival grounds. New stage, new shade structure, new pavers, new landscaping. Their staff, and again, staff is still reviewing this application. They've asked us to give them just a finite number of events, at least to start with. So it wouldn't be open every day, every weekend. So we requested 20 events. I think that's a reasonable start of festival grounds events per year. Those can be up to 1 or 4 days, like for a 3-day weekend, Memorial Day weekend, or something like that. Certainly could have a longer event. This area is zone mixed use. It is a 24-hour zone. 24-hour operations are allowed by right. However, that we don't think would make sense to operate right away 24 hours a day. So we're proposing going till 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursdays, and then stopping at midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. We did hire, at the request of the city, an acoustical consultant. That study is currently under review. However, I should note that residential noise standards do not apply to mixed use zoning. So in other words, even if there are residential structures downtown, the zoning is what applies as far as acoustical standards, and it's all mixed use. So residential, again, standards don't apply, but certainly should be considered as we move forward with requests. It's a little similar to kind of years ago, the Eddy was given a special use permit. It was surrounded by residential units, but it was zoned mixed use. So the noise standards didn't apply, but council did put some conditions on that use permit just to make sure we were sensitive to our neighbors. Each event, this is important for all 20 events, they'll all be different. One might be a Hot August Nights event, one might be a Burning Man event, one might be a Taco Truck Tuesday event. You know, there may be kind of, you know, a wide variety of different types of festivals. So each one will have to come to the city, bring a detailed security and operational plan, including how alcohol sales and consumption will be managed, how EMS, medical, police, and fire will be managed, and get all those departments' input and any recommendations, including, unfortunately, we have to say this nowadays, but any mass casualty incident plan as well. Again, it's just going to depend on the size and scope of each event. We'd imagine there'd probably be a template security and operational plan, but that would be modified as we presented each of those 20 events to the city. We have, as mentioned, trying to solicit as much feedback as possible. Went to the Ward 1 NAB last week before you tonight, and then hopefully going to the Montage at some point later this month. There was a question at the Ward 1 NAB of kind of Uber drop-off pickup and some of the kind of parking and traffic strategies. So you can see here the festival grounds as far as kind of access and travel to. There's 5 bus routes within the vicinity, including 10 bus stops along 4th Street and within a block or two. That's one way to travel and to come and leave any festival. 2, we have Uber drop off and pickup. It made sense to put it down here in a lot that's currently owned by the Sands. So it's easy for Lyft or Uber to come in and pick up and drop off. We don't anticipate anyone queuing, you know, in the streets or even on the sidewalk. It'll be on private property. There are within the vicinity over 500 parking spaces owned by Jacobs within, say, 1,000 feet from the Gold Dust West to these lots on Ralston, to the lots at the Sands, to the lots across Arlington, to the lots here on Uber drop off and pickup. So plenty of parking just for on land owned by Jacobs, but certainly, you know, it's blocks away from downtown where there's the Rose parking garages, you know, El Dorado and Silver Legacy's parking garages. There's a Silver Peak parking garage. So we don't anticipate any shortage of parking options, as well as in our traffic analysis suggested that many attendees will walk from, say, either the Sands or other local hotels downtown, as well as not only some existing residential units downtown, but gosh, there's hundreds proposed in downtown over the next couple of years. We imagine a lot of that pedestrian activity will occur as well. The queuing plan, this was important to staff, making sure we're not having folks, say, standing on the streets or standing on the sidewalks. So the great thing about the existing Glow Plaza, it's a great place for queuing. That entire area, folks can stand, kind of hang out maybe before the gates are open at the festival grounds. Won't be on West 4th Street or anywhere on public right-of-ways. So they can queue here in the existing Glow Plaza, as well as this alleyway that runs behind the project. There's an entrance. You could walk between these 2 parking lots off of Ralston, certainly queue in this alleyway and enter and exit through the south part of the grounds. Again, keeping folks away from public right-of-ways and sidewalks. Here's the landscape plan. You can see certainly a lot of green. I think we could all appreciate and be happy that there's some more green space coming in the downtown Reno. There's about 60 trees required for the project. We're at close to 70. It's 20% landscaping required, which would be around 18,000 square feet. We're at almost 20,000 square feet of landscaping. There's close, I think over 30 deciduous trees that will be planted. There'll be shrubs, ornamental grasses, about 100 of those spread out through the property, as well as other kind of flowers and perennials. So we have a local architect who has come up with this plan along with the landscaping. So we're excited about what that will look like when it's built out. Here's one more look at it, just looking down, again, the shade structure, trees, landscaping, the existing Glow Plaza, some concerts. Really excited about activating this area and downtown Reno. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, really appreciate the opportunity to present and hear your input tonight. I might just leave this up. Madam Chair, I have a feeling I might get some questions on different slides. So I can put it down when you're ready.
Mac, can you?
Sorry for the
Oh, there Carly is. Is that you, Carly?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I got disconnected. My apologies, you guys. Okay, so it looks like we are ready to open this up for questions. Would you mind unsharing your screen, Garrett? There we go. All right, so it looks like we do have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and address the board first if we could. So I see that Mac Rossi has his hand up. Go ahead, Mac.
Thank you, Mac Rossi for the record. Mr. Gordon, I'm just curious, I know it's just a diagram right now with a little bit of everything in it. Do you think more bathrooms might be needed?
Thank you for the question. We've been working with staff and I do have a ratio of how many portable restrooms are required per occupancy. I believe it's 1 per around 200 people is the standard. So I think we plan not only to meet, but to exceed that and have them staged over on the east side of the property.
Thank you.
I have a question from Gary Cecil.
Good evening, Mr. Gordon. It's good to see you again. I do want to recognize what you said, that you're doing us a great favor by being here tonight. I know that you went to Ward 1 and you're doing this as a courtesy, but I really do appreciate it. If you bear with me, I do have a fair few questions, and if it takes too much time, maybe we could meet offline, but I want to offer some comments and questions about the application materials that you put in, your cover note and the traffic study. Is it okay if I go through those with you? I'm looking for some points of clarification more than anything.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer the best I can. Any question you have, no problem.
Okay, and some of the comments I make are meant just in a positive spirit in terms of I know that you're going before the planning committee, and these might be questions that hopefully maybe if you haven't thought about them that may help you to do it. So for example, one of the things, as I look at your application letter, by the way, you mentioned although the property is not adjacent to any residentially zoned property, and zoned is the key word, you're absolutely right there. But I do think that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of residences around there. So I just wanted to be, for the other NAB members, just to understand that. One of the things you do very well in your presentations is to go through the city master plan, and in this case also what's required for a conditional use permit. And you're very helpful to me, at least anyway, I know, and I'm sure to the city people, that there's things you go through and say, here are the standards that are expected of the developers in this zone and for a conditional permit. But I do. There's some parts of it that I don't understand. Maybe you can help me to clear up. For example, under the master plan of the community development, you make a statement there that one of the aims is to promote patronizing businesses in the area. Okay, I get that. But improve on the quality of life for residents. Could you give me a bit of background as to how it's going to improve the life of residents?
Sure, may I, Madam Chair, you mind if I share my screen again? I do have some master plan policies that Mr. Cecil's referencing, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. Let's see here, share from current slide. So you're absolutely right. One of the criteria or the conditions of a conditional use permit is to make sure it's compliant with the master plan. And so I just pulled a few. I could have kept going, but I have kind of 3 slides. I won't. I know it's late. I won't go through them all unless you'd like me to. But to your point, many of them are focused on arts and culture and quality of life and urban revitalization. And again, arts and culture is mentioned again, and public spaces and pedestrian realm and community amenities. I think all of those combined, more community amenities, I mean, more places for, say, Art Town to perform. We could certainly use that. Pedestrian realm, more places for folks walking up and down 4th Street to pop in and enjoy some more arts and culture, music, you know, a local connectivity and interactions. Again, more arts and culture. The master plan contemplates promoting arts and culture, a variety of high quality venues accessible to individuals. I think all that combined, and I'll kind of stop here and maybe I can clarify, but all these policies together, bundled together, I think this fits squarely into it, of meeting some of those needs of a new venue downtown that we can all enjoy.
Okay. So could you give me some examples of some of the events that are have currently been planned that would fit within that description of the activities? I'm talking about the ones that would be, you know, up until midnight at weekends or up until 11 o'clock Sunday through Thursday, those kind of events.
Yeah, what we anticipate is a wide range, right? And I think we're still, in the event we do are given this approval, we'll certainly have a lot more ideas. I can say that AEG, which is a national company who puts and promotes events across the country, they currently promote events for Jacobs in Cleveland, that is Jacobs Pavilion. And so having that resource to bring events to these festival grounds, I think will be very, very exciting. But to your point, we imagine probably something during Hot August nights, something during kind of playing off existing events, you know, the water park, the adventure park, the river festival. We imagine events during that time, during Art Town, hosting some events, festivals there. During, let's say, Street Vibrations, we imagine events there. But then also the Sands, typically, it will be rebranded later this year, but has their own events. I mean, there's a taco festival that they hold for a certain weekend every month. Burning Man, we'd love to play off that. We've already been approached by a Burning Man for kind of pre-events and post-decompression events here. So a wide variety of diverse, I think, group of 20 events that we would be limited to per year.
Again, could you just address why you want it until midnight at the weekend and 11 o'clock during the week, though? Why that late?
Yeah, it's my understanding that that's, well, one, we're in a downtown mixed-use entertainment core. So I think that's why we did pick midnight on weekends. Two, my understanding, like on Virginia Street with the Italian Festival and the Hot Wing Festival and you know, other events that they have, midnight is pretty consistent for downtown Reno. So we thought that was reasonable of just continuing the tradition of really good events in this core.
Actually, funnily enough, I always like to have points of comparison. So I pulled the event permit for last October's Great Italian Festival that the Row was granted by the city. And the event end time was 7 p.m. on a Saturday and 6 p.m. on a Sunday. So that's a considerable difference to 11 p.m. and midnight.
Well, I can pull that. I wasn't aware of that specific event, but I can say the goal here is to reactivate downtown. And I would imagine that having events until 11 o'clock or even midnight should not, be a disruption in Reno's downtown entertainment district. But this is why I'm here. I'm happy to get input and, work with staff on some conditions that, make sense for the entire city.
Okay, I just wanted to share something, if you just hang on a second here, and I won't be too much longer, but I do want to go through this. This is a picture taken from the sidewalk in front of the Glow Plaza. So right across the street from there, there's this residential unit, and around the corner is the Renovo, the apartments that Jacobs did a very good job of improving there. When you look over the wall, this is standing on 4th Street on the pedestrian sidewalk that you put in, and you look across there, that building there is the Onyx. That was one of the two I think we saw a plan view of earlier. And there are 57 units on that side of the building immediately adjacent to the Glow Plaza. This is a photograph taken with my back to the edge of the Glow Plaza. I guess it is the legal line. And right in front of me there is the alleyway that you mentioned was going to be for queuing. And behind that is the Sarah's and Arms, which is a low-income housing unit run by the Reno Housing Authority. And the distance between there is the distance between the Glow Plaza and that particular facility. It's the same distance too, incidentally, between that edge of that property and the Onyx building, which was the one I'm showing here. So when people are queuing in that alleyway, they're going to be literally right up against the back of 59 units there. So I honestly have a bit of a concern about that in terms of noise and just noise in general. I think at the Ward 1 meeting, you mentioned, if I'm correct, that you're doing an acoustical study in order to see if there's a way to mitigate the noise. Is that still happening?
Yeah, staff requests us to do an acoustical study, which was submitted to staff. It's under review. But let me say that this is downtown 24-hour mixed use area. So there's no residential zoning close by. And under the code, we could operate 24 hours in, again, a mixed use area. Now, I think it's important, obviously, to be considerate of surrounding land uses and how we could potentially mitigate those impacts. But I do think it's important that choosing to live downtown in the entertainment mixed use area, 24-hour zone, I think certainly comes with it the ability to move forward with projects like this. And not only taking my word for it, but I could give you dozens and dozens of master plan policies and the downtown action plan that supports this, a proposal like this to really energize West 4th Street, which has been desperately needed.
No, I understand all that. I do appreciate that. Legally speaking, you're totally within your bounds, but I believe the city still has the right through a conditional use permit to put some conditions like hours of operation on that. Is that correct? Maybe that's a question for you, Brooklyn. If I could just ask you that.
Certainly, Brooke Oswald, planner with the city of Reno. Yes, this is a conditional use permit that does allow city staff to outline and look at this. Staff had several comments and concerns as this went in. Comments, those addressing those comments were received just within the last couple days from the applicant and are under review to see if they've addressed those concerns. But yes, hours of operation is one thing that could be conditioned through that permit.
Okay, while I have you, could I just ask another question about the conditional use permit? I'm looking at a sheet from the one that the Row had for the Italian Festival that is highlighted. I don't understand it exactly, but it may be relevant. It says impacted neighbor notification signature sheet. Are you familiar with those?
So these are specific to the events or activity permits. So we have two permits that we allow. We allow one on public property. So the Row would be using Virginia Street probably in that situation. And then another one is to have a special event on private property, which is what Jacobs had used last year to conduct their events. So this is a little different because they're actually asking, this is a use that is allowed, and they're asking to be able to do this in consistency now, or do this on a regular basis without having to continue to apply for those permits. And so they are a little bit different as we're looking at those special events to looking at this being a venue itself that's functioning on a regular basis. That being said, you know, those surrounding neighbors or those things, that is something that could be conditioned or looked at, but is not, I mean, it doesn't have to be per se of this, because of that conditional use permit, all those neighbors or the owners are notified, and they can notify their tenants or raise those other concerns also. So there is a noticing system already within the conditional use permit.
Okay, just for your information on that, I did contact the Reno Housing Authority, and to get comments back to you are going to be hard. It's a low-income housing thing there, the Saracen Arms, and unfortunately, although they offer cut-rate internet service, many of the residents cannot afford that. So it's going to be difficult for them to make comments, and I think the city really needs to hear from them in some way. So just a comment there. And Mr. Gordon, just a couple, please bear with me. This is such an important project for downtown in general, and I may not get this opportunity again. But I had just a question about, you requested coming to the Montage, which is where I live. Are you going to go to the Saracen Arms or the Onyx and offer an overview for the people there so they know what's coming up?
For the record, yes, happy to come to the Montage. As I understand it, well, one, I was asked to come to the Montage on a regular basis, but two, I don't think you guys would have received any noticing for this project. The Housing Authority and the Courtyard or the Onyx next to us will receive notice. They have received notice already. We have not heard back from them or their ownership, but it's a good point. Let me put it on my list to see if there's any way we can do a little outreach. Also, just to circle back, I think I might have compared apples to oranges when I was comparing, you know, this to say, you know, downtown, what happens on Virginia Street. In my mind, it's a little late, sorry. I was thinking more like the Eddy, right? Certainly what happens on the public right of way on Virginia Street or happens on Sierra Street or Center, that's a public right of way and has different standards and permits for what happens there. Certainly you can't keep right of ways closed, and there's certain other requirements. So I would compare this to the Eddy, which I know Councilwoman Jordan spent a lot of time on and working through conditions to make sure the Riverside residents were not negatively impacted. So we would imagine the same kind of analysis here, which I believe there was a baby step of operating for a period of time, seeing how it went, and then expanding their hours. And I think they operate now till 11 or 12 o'clock. I'd have to confirm that, and I will. So I think that's more appropriate. Sorry for kind of misspeaking. I just am excited about the opportunity here.
Okay, and one final question. In your cover letter, you reference, I think, a total of what your current estimate, 3,500 attendees. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would envision, for these 20 events, around 3,000 attendees. It just depends, right? They won't be ticketed. They'll be open to the public. We hope there's 3,000. That means we're doing something right. But in full transparency, given the size of the project, it would, as I understand it from the fire department, have an occupancy load of over 6,000. But we would guess, given our projections of the different festivals, to have hopefully thousands of people moving through on a project by project weekend or event.
The reason I ask that is in Headway Transportation's analysis, they use a base of an average of 2,000 attendees per event. That's so that is 75%, or your 3,500 is 75% variance to that. Now that's a pretty important number to get right because it affects a whole bunch of things in terms of traffic, parking, how busy it will be down there. So, and as somebody else I think mentioned earlier, one other commenter, this is a 2-year-old study. So I do have concerns about that. For example, everything is based upon 2,000. If there could be a sensitivity analysis where you say, well, what would happen if it really was 3,500 or 6,000? What would it look? What would it do to traffic and parking requirements? And also something like they use from the Federal Highway Administration a rate of 3 people per vehicle. Well, what would happen if it went down to 2, and yet you still have 3,500 people? I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think the traffic analysis is adequate for this particular size of project, which is a huge one for downtown. So just my comments. But again, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I hope you do get a chance to speak to the people in those places directly behind the Globe Plaza. I do think they need to be heard. Thank you very much.
And Gary, I appreciate if I can touch on that last comment. So clearly there's really no parking requirements for downtown anymore, but we have plenty of parking. And let me give you an example. The Reno Aces, that capacity is over, I believe, 8,000 people, and there was no parking ever required for it, right? There's no parking garage required. There's no parking because there's ample places to park downtown. There's Uber pickup and drop off. There's bus routes. Same with here. Jacobs has over 500 parking spaces himself. There's plenty of parking down with the other parking garages nearby. Our Uber pickup and drop off location, I think, is well put. The bus locations. So as the staff report concluded, as the traffic study concluded, I thought it was important to note this. It says special event vehicle traffic of a similar magnitude and a typical condition during weekend evenings and weekend events in downtown Reno. No significant traffic impacts are anticipated, just like the ballpark, just like other events downtown. Existing conditions can certainly accommodate what we believe will be hopefully very successful with thousands and thousands of people attending our event, and hopefully walking over from the Riverfest or walking over from an Aces game, or continuing to revitalize our downtown Reno. So Gary, happy to talk with you whenever you want. Email me, happy to go have coffee with you and work through some of your comments. Really appreciate the input.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you guys very much for the discussion. Let's move along. I have a couple hands raised. Councilmember Jordan.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Frederick. He's had his hand up for quite some time.
Yes.
Mine was just more of a comment. I live downtown and I can hear a little bit of the noise on the Arlington Towers. I face west, but the close at midnight, it's not so bad when you consider the noise that comes from the bars that are open to 4 to 2 in the morning. And if you look for a social event that's not a casino and not a bar, to have something that with a little culture to it is will really, really help downtown be not so boring. So I appreciate the efforts to develop this. That's my comment.
Thank you, Friedrich.
Thank you.
Carly, my question was, and you know what, I saw it in the chat and it was brought up a little bit ago, was the Eddy. And the Eddy, I think, is open till 10 o'clock on the weekdays and then 11:30 on Friday, Saturday, I think. And we did go very cautiously into that arrangement as an open, open top event. It was a new product we had never seen here before. And I'm not trying to compare the two, but there is some level of similarities. Is we were very concerned of some pretty significant impacts that may have, and those really didn't come to light. They just really didn't. It's been a pretty great venue that a lot of people really enjoy. I'm just sharing that because we had similar concerns with that space, and it actually has worked out pretty well. So that to me is a comparable, is the Eddy.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. That was actually one of my comments too. So I'm just going to interject there to segue on that. We actually, as board members, were approached by numerous residents that were in close proximity to the Eddy at the time that it was going through approval. And I actually took a step to follow up with some of those individuals that reached out to me personally and gave me tours of their apartments, showed me how close they were to the project. And every one of them is more than pleased and really happy actually to be a neighbor. So I guess my only feedback might be, I think being a good neighbor goes a really, really long way in this town. And having that open dialogue with the residents around you is just enormous. Usually something that might come up as a problem can be squashed very, very easily through a conversation. So I would just really encourage that open dialogue. And that was really my only question, other than, if I may, just throw in my other question. This isn't anticipating, I heard you say this is kind of playing off the other current events that are going on downtown. This isn't replacing any of those events, correct?
It would be 20 new events. That's correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, I don't see any more questions from the board members, but please, you guys, feel free to raise your hand if I'm missing something. I'm going to go right into the chat here real quick just to see if we're covering anything. And then I do have one more question from Art. So I'm not missing you, Art. I'm getting to you. Lisa Hill did say, will you be following the new city tree plan? Is her first question. That was in our presentation last month, so it's a good question to have come up, I suppose.
Yeah, we're great question. We're complying with what's currently in code. I know that tree ordinance is still proposed, to be honest. I don't know how what we're proposing differs from that proposal that's still going through the public outreach process, but it's a good question. I'm sure council or planning commission will have that same question. So I will follow up and see how that compares. So good question.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Lisa. She did have a comment too as a follow-up, just that, not all the residents who live downtown have housing choices. So maybe just to keep that in mind. Friedrich was able to get on and speak his comment, which, he doesn't feel that midnight is too late. Reno is quite boring at times, and he looks forward to this being a little longer available. Bryce Chisholm is saying, I wonder if people will actually use an Uber pickup spot a block and a half away, or will they just be requesting to be picked up along 4th, which I think is a pretty good comment, actually. Not all people know where the Uber pickup location might be. So do you have any thoughts on how you might address that?
Sure, it's a good question. And I actually, working on the downtown city center project, learned a lot about Uber. So you can work directly with the company. So when you put in, go to the Jacobs Glow Plaza and hit go, it'll take you to the pickup drop-off location. And when you order an Uber, you can work with a company where you have to walk over to a specific area. Well, there'll be signage but that's where you're going to be pick up, because we obviously don't want any holdup of traffic on 4th Street or people waiting there on the sidewalk. And really, it's not a couple blocks away. If you look at it, if you go walk the site, I mean, it's just across Ralston, kind of kitty corner to where we're proposing. I mean, I want to say it would be 100 feet or hundreds of feet away, not like it's thousands. So we can definitely manage that to make sure it's properly done, which happens in a lot of venues, you know, across the country.
Great, appreciate that. Okay, Art Ringel has a question.
Thank you. Just in listening to some of this dialogue here about what's allowed in the mixed use, and basically there's no height limit, there's no parking, there's no noise standards, none of that seems to matter. It's a free-for-all zone is the way I'm reading it. You know, all over this country, there are cities that where entertainment and residential housing coexist. That's something that's, and cities around the country have conditional use permits and things of that nature so that they can't coexist. And that's what this process really should be about. The city has an obligation. It's not really up to the developer, it's up to the city to take care of all of the stakeholders in the community, the developers, the businesses, the residents, and all the others. And it gets back to, and also, and under state law, the city is required to implement and follow its master plan. I noticed you didn't mention master plan policy 3.1B, which is to promote housing in the downtown area. How does, and this goes to the findings of fact required under the conditional use permit, how does this use, not that I'm opposed to it, but how does it fit that finding? And that applies on a variety of fronts. The issue was brought up of the parking analysis, and I was kind of appalled or just amazed to see that it's 2 years old. There's a tremendous amount of new residential development going on that has gone on within that last 2 years. There's a 45,000 square foot commercial complex at Keystone and Fifth that's taken place. Was that traffic generation included in the parking analysis? And if not, that speaks to the cumulative impact. If you don't do cumulative impact analysis, we're all going to wake up someday when you do these things piecemeal and find that we can't move around from one point to another. So I just don't understand how the city of Reno doesn't require that. It's been planning practice as long 30 years that I've been doing it. So so hopefully the city staff will include a requirement that a cumulative analysis be provided for this project. And then there's some comments in here and some of your statements about findings of fact, and yet there's no reports to justify these things like noise and dust and things of that nature. I didn't see a report to that effect. These to me are flaws in the application that staff needs to bring up when it goes forward to the planning commission. Those are my comments. Oh, one last thing about coming to the Montage, where I live there as well. I've heard the presentation from Jacobs or from yourself and the Jacobs folks for quite some time, but we've asked questions that have never been answered. I, for one, if you come back to the Montage, I'd like to hear answers to those questions we've posed over and over and over again. Those concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Art.
May I respond?
Absolutely. Please feel free.
Yeah, Art, just thanks for the input, as always. Really appreciate it. One, on the master plan policy, so it does require substantial compliance with the master plan. So certainly every project, if it's a commercial project, doesn't deal with the housing policies, or if it's a housing project, doesn't the commercial policies aren't applicable. So you kind of look at the specific project. I can say on the housing front, it's really exciting though. On that city property on 02nd Street, we close on that property on Friday. We'll be writing it to Jacobs, we're writing a check to the city for over $3 million that can be used toward the public safety center or however they want to use it. and then we have to apply for a building permit within the next 18 months as a result of Councilmember Jordan and City Council's conditions, as well as 10% of that project will be affordable housing. So housing, at least in the district, is on the way. To your point about the traffic study, let me just I'll be completely transparent. You'll notice it was dated March 2020. What happened in March 2020? The epidemic started. This should have been open. The plan was to open this in March 2020, but obviously everything got put on hold while we all dealt with COVID. And so it was the same project, now just called something different, given branding and moving forward. But I will take your input and make sure prior to Planning Commission, we'll update this if needed for anything 2022 related. But that's why the traffic study happened in 2020 and nothing happened because of COVID, and now we're back. Hope that answers some of your questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Are there any more comments, questions? Please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move along. I do have one comment, if you don't mind, Garrett, from Lisa Hill. Agreed that added downtown residences make developing new livability standards downtown imperative for city planning to look attached. To look ahead, I'm assuming, maybe. Okay, so moving right along, and I just really quickly want to thank you, Garrett, for bringing this to our board. This is really quite important information. I know we have a number of residents that attend our meetings, so it's imperative that we kind of see big picture what's going on downtown, and you guys are going to be a very large part. So I appreciate your time and coming to us.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next quarter. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and move on to item C, which is board, commission, committee member reports and announcements. This is limited to items that do not appear elsewhere on the agenda, and no items can be taken. But does anybody have any reports or announcements that they would like to share? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close that item and move on to item D, which is future agenda items. Discussion for items for future agendas. Again, no action can be taken, but is there any items for request? Mac?
Yeah, thank you. Mac Rossi for the record. I would just like to keep on top of NDOT, RTC, on a few of the items that are sitting on Ward 5. I'd really appreciate you putting that on and see if we can keep on top of it and don't give them any leeway. Thank you.
I appreciate that too. I was going to mention, and I wouldn't mind your feedback here, Mac, a little bit. What are you thinking? Giving them a month or two, maybe scheduling them for a future specific meeting, or do you want?
I would like to address it every month, and if they have no progress, then we move on from there, but let's keep on top of it, please.
Got it. Amy, I'm sure you got it too. Okay, great. Are there any other items or items of interest to the other members that you would like to address? There's quite a bit going on downtown, and I know that specifically, Gary, you might have something that you would like. I know that you guys are trying to kind of be on top of things, but just curious to hear from you if you have anything in particular.
I think just as Mr. Rangel said, I would like to, I know it said quarterly, but I would like to see some presentation before the Glow Plaza is taken to Planning Commission, just because apparently there's a lot of things that have been provided by Jacobs Entertainment that we haven't had a chance to see yet. So I'd kind of like an update on that, and in particular, the traffic information. That is of great concern to us downtown with the numbers of people that we're talking about.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, one thing that that I would like to mention, if I may. What we had in the past was an actual item that was, I believe, in between C and D. It could have even been maybe E, I'm not sure, but we always had a follow-up on projects that we had heard and just kind of the status, because once they left us, you know, in the presentation that came to the NAB, we would fill out our comment cards, it would go to Planning Commission, it would go to City Council, but then we lost track of it and we never understood, you know, if things were approved, if they were, you know, sent back for some reason to Planning Commission, whatever the case may be. It would be really nice to have those little follow-ups. So I'm hoping that maybe, Amy, we can put that back on our agenda. It's just, I know that's probably something that needs to be discussed outside of us, but that would be my specific request, is that we circle back around to some of those projects.
Yeah, this is Amy Pennington for the record. I will see about that. The template of the agenda rundown is not decided by me, but I will raise that as a suggestion.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, I don't see any more hands, no more discussion, and I'm sure we're all eager to wrap this up. So the next item would be E, public comment, and this is for public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. This is just kind of closing the meeting. If anybody has something they would like to speak about, I'm not seeing any hands. I'll give a couple more seconds here. While I'm waiting, I will read through the chat, and it looks like there is a appreciation to Mac that Lisa Hill agrees that there's an update needed on the Keystone Mccarran Monthly, and then Gary Cecil would support that follow-ups on projects occur. Okay, I do not see any public comment. I'm going to go ahead and close that item and move to item F, which is adjournment, and this is for possible action.
Mac Rossi to make motion to adjourn, please.
Thank you, Mac. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Died from a lack of a second.
Usually we have 4 or 5 seconds, but Gary Cecil, I heard a second. So with a first and a second, can I get all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
All of those opposed say nay. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you guys very much for
Thanks,
another
Carly.
great meeting.
Thanks, Carly. Nice job.
Thanks, Carly.
Carly.
Thank you.